Howdy, folks, and welcome back to the SoundAppraiser podcast. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Cary Nightingale. With me, as always, is Kevin Niebrick. Kevin, we have got a couple of songs left out of our last YouTube Roulette session that we need to talk about. And I think I noticed that we have some wider gaps in our scores than usual. So I think we're going to have a really good conversation about why we rated things the way that we did. We've got two tracks that came out of YouTube Roulette. So we're going to start off with something that came out of the hip hop playlist on YouTube Roulette. This is a trap song called Narrow Road by NLE Choppa. I think, Kevin, your score was a little bit higher on this one, or much higher potentially than mine was. So I will prosecute, and I'll let you defend at the end, and then we'll see maybe where there's a little bit of give in either of our scores. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
All right. So this one, from a compositional standpoint, it's got a solid beat. It's good for vibing, I thought. There is not much by way of harmony. Melody has what sounds like the same four notes repeated on the synth, and the vocal flow doesn't have a lot of variance in it. Lyrically, there's a good flow with few enough instances of, like, say, bad rhymes to not really bother mentioning, and that augments the rhythm, I think, in this type of song. It's about the flow, it's about the vibe, but thematically, the lyrics as a text breaks my second, third, and fifth commandments of lyric writing, which are fetishizing guns, glorifying violence, and aggrandizing oneself.
All the fun stuff.
Kevin, if all you can think of to do for fun is boast about yourself and your new whip and go shooting guns and murdering people, then you are a boring person indeed. And I hope that's not the case with this artist, because I think there's a lot of promise here. So my scores there basically half credit for melody, lyrics, and harmony. A much stronger 0.8 out of 1 for the rhythm. As far as the performance, I felt like it was a very low effort performance from both vocalists. This features a guy by the name of Lil Baby doing the second verse, which I think might actually be considered a bridge. But both vocalists, pretty low effort, aside from turning on their auto tune, and instrumentation, I think, was pretty much all programmed. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a lot of merit in being able to say, I created music on my laptop in my bedroom. It's something I've experimented with. Kevin, I think you've probably experimented with. There is a lot of good music that can be made using that format.
And it's a fun thing to do. Fun technique.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of fun. Remember Cash Offer? It was a terrible song.
Oh my God, I love Cash Offer. Let's review Cash Offer.
So basically about half credit for the performance. I think there was a little more feel, a little less accuracy. I usually feel that way about very obvious auto-tune, and maybe that's because I've been programmed to see that as a crutch for someone who's not a good vocalist, because I have used auto-tune on my own stuff. It sounds terrible with me. It sounds great for NLE Choppa. So that's fine for that. Production, I didn't really have much by way of notes. Slightly above average production. And as far as the appeal, this is the much more subjective part. I'm really not the audience for this, being that it broke 3 of my commandments of lyric writing. But I did like the beat. I liked some of the musical ideas. And not to mention the hook. Sounds great. On a Narrow Road. That's a great hook. So a little more than half credit for emotion, and about 3/4 credit for repeat listenability. But that's my take on it. And Kevin, I think you were a little bit more positive or appreciative of this track. So I would love to hear your thoughts, and let's see where we differ and if maybe one of us changes our mind at all.
And we might find a middle ground here that brings us closer to a nice average rating. But yeah, I rated this one pretty high, just because overall it has a great sound. I think that the track, all the elements combined, whether or not you liked one or more of the you put them elements. Uh, you put them together and they make a great sound. Um, as far as composition goes, pretty high across the board for me. I did like that melody. I know it was kind of a very simple, repetitive piano sound. But even just the inflection of his voice up and down, I thought it was pretty nice, with or without the auto tune. Obviously, I've never heard it without the autotune, so we got to talk about that later. The rhythm I thought was very strong. The harmony, I could hear it maybe a little bit more than you, or I was convinced I could hear it a little bit more than you could. A couple extra points there. Zero point 0.9 out of 10 for melody, zero point 0.9 out of 10 for rhythm, zero point 0.7 out of 10 for out of 1 for harmony. Lyrics, zero point 0.8 out of 1. I do agree. I think the one part that we do definitely agree on is that I'm Going Down a Narrow Road is an excellent hook. It has there's good imagery there. I do appreciate that. I think the lyrics in this case do an excellent job of conveying the position of the narrator. You might disagree with the narrator. You might consider his worldview to be defeatist, or you might condemn the narrator for failing to explore maybe healthier alternatives. But the lyrics themselves tell a story that's compelling and genuine. I thought it was pretty well done. The song itself, structurally, continues to build and build. It feels like heading towards an unexpectedly abrupt and tragic end based on the lyrics. But then it just kind of fades out and leaves you with this indefinite conclusion. You don't know where it goes. As far as performance goes, this is one where we widely differ as well. We should talk about this, but I gave it a full marks for accuracy and feel, and pretty high marks for production as well. I had one problem with the arrangement, and so I gave it a zero point 0.5 out of zero point 0.6. The problem I had with the arrangement was there was this intermittent silence that they programmed in there, and I felt like it was distracting. There was an exception at around 2 minutes and 28 seconds to 2 minutes and 30 seconds, so really short, really abrupt, but it drops in and out. The background, the rhythm, the melody, everything but the vocals drops in and out with the beat. And I thought that was pretty cool. I actually liked that. And appeal, I guess we were way off on appeal too. I rated it pretty high. Emotion, as far as emotion goes, gave it a 1.4 out of 1.6, pretty close. Innovation, I gave it an extra point, zero point 0.3 out of zero point 0.4, more than halfway, but maybe not super innovative. And repeat listenability is high, 1.3 out of 1.6. I just dig this track and I would listen to it again. I think we might have a deeper conversation on, your three rules on promoting the future you want to see rather than the future that, the present that you're in, especially now more than ever. I don't know. There's a lot to talk about there, but I thought this was really accurate. I thought it was fair, and it just tells a story about, it seems kind of defeatist. It seems kind of sad, and it really, the mood of the track really lends well to it. So yeah, I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think the most constructive conversation that we can have here about the difference is probably around performance and maybe a little bit on composition. If you heard more in harmony than I did, then that's the way you heard it, and maybe that's the mix or my ears. Like, I don't know.
And those weren't that different, those scores, but I think you're right. The performance aspect of it was highly different.
Yeah. So from a performance standpoint, I'm imagining this young man making most of this on his laptop. Maybe it's in a studio. I'm not sure. I think he's been making music for a couple of years and is still very young. So again, that's where a lot of the promise as an artist comes from. I think from a performance standpoint, a middling score is appropriate in most cases. And part of this might be I'm not that familiar with hip hop and especially not with trap. So, which I think is how this track is categorized. Being unfamiliar with this song's peers, I'm judging it on a broader scale against everything on the musical spectrum. So I think the musicianship that it takes to make a track, to make a beat on your laptop, to write down your lyrics, and then let them flow. And there is musicianship in the lyric delivery. Whether I like the lyrics or not, I recognize absolutely that there is musicianship there. Being able to flow competently. I can't do it. Kev, I doubt you can do it.
Heard you do it.
But this guy does it.
You were drunk though.
Uh, what's that?
I heard you do it, but you were drunk though.
That's a different kind of flow. So I think the highest marks, when you're talking about giving a full 100% of the available points in performance, specifically, accuracy, feel. I want the music itself to be technically challenging. I want the performance to be as close to flawless but still human as possible. And I think with a programmed beat like this most likely has, or
Absolutely.
how it sounds to me, to my ears, I don't think that merits a full score in the performance section.
And I come back. I was coming at it when I reviewed this. I was coming at it from a different mindset. I don't disagree with your points. I see merit in your points, and I see why you would say all those things. So I don't disagree with you on those. But from where I'm coming from, I was looking at it contextually against other hip hop songs. I thought that it incorporated a lot of elements that are common in the hip hop genre, and I thought it did it in a very maybe not a unique way, but it was well delivered, and it was the accuracy in that regard was high. He's not a singer like Mariah Carey's a singer, as far as I know. I've never heard the this gentleman's voice without auto tune, but I don't think for the context that I don't think it needs to be. I thought that the vocal performance was high. I thought the feel definitely hit me. I feel like everything came together and created this mood. I imagined a car driving down a lonely highway in the dark, and I could picture it. It really hit me emotionally. I thought that it was strong. It's like, do you want to compare, like, how would our score hold up if you wanted to compare Beethoven to a punk rock band? Those are two very different things. And so I think that you're right in saying that it should be able to compare those things as objectively as possible. But at the same time, I think context has a say in this somewhere in there. So I think that we're both not incorrect. I think we just kind of, maybe we still got to dial it in a little bit more.
Yeah, I think we're approaching from two different angles, and that's probably fine. That's probably appropriate for us to do that, because what that does is, in the aggregate, if you take Kevin's really high score and my much lower score, in the aggregate, Narrow Road receives a tune score of 7.2 out of 10, which I should mention is still relatively high. That means it's not a bad song. And your mileage as a listener may vary. You might love the song. You might not like it. You might love the genre but hate the song. You might hate the genre but love the song. Ultimately, I think the fact that we listened to it and gave a shot to a song, certainly for me, this is not something that I usually would listen to, not part of my usual musical taste. I'm still better for having heard it. It has expanded my worldview a little bit, whether I rated it highly or not, based on what we just talked about, the musicianship and context and everything. So, do you think that's fair that my score dragged yours down, Kev?
Yeah, absolutely. I do see, again, I see merit in the way you rated it, and I trust your judgment. So I'm not saying you're wrong. You and I just think differently. We hear things differently. And I think that by and large that's going to happen. But I think that this tool that you've created, the TuneScore itself, is a good impartial judge. And maybe that we're the loose end here. We're the human element to it. But I think the more we do this, I think the more we're going to dial it in. And the next time we review a song in this genre, I'm going to think about this conversation that we had, and I'm going to keep it in mind, points that you made. I'm still going to have my, we still might have widely varying scores, but I think it's fair that we did this. I think that it's going to be helpful in the long run, and that's really going to dial in our tune scores.
All right. Well, I hope that we continue to have some
A lot of
some distance between our scores, because otherwise it's going to be a really bland conversation. Uh, and nobody's going to want to listen.
And we had a
Uh,
lot of curveballs this week. I think, there was a
yeah,
lot
this
of things that we hadn't considered before, cover songs, and things like this. So
things maybe out of our comfort zone too. So let's call it a 7.2 with an asterisk, uh, just like
that's
the
fair.
Houston Astros World Series championship in 2017 should have had.
Ouch.
But let's move on to the final of our YouTube roulette songs, which is this was labeled in the punk genre by the artist Rise Against, and it's called Prayer of the Refugee. And I'll just mention one thing I really liked here. There's a widely varying, well, maybe not that widely varying, but there was a broad difference in the tempos in certain parts of the song. It ranged from uh, like 156 beats per minute all the way up to about 198 by my count. God, it's hard to count that many beats per minute, like in a minute, you know?
Mhm.
Uh, a pretty fun song to listen to, very energetic. Kevin, I think my score on this one, again, was a little bit lower. So I'll prosecute first, and then we'll hear your defense of it.
Tear it apart.
Well, I didn't hate it. I'm not going to tear it apart. Just ultimately, I'm not the audience for this song. So let's start, as always, with composition. I think this has a nice, catchy melody that will probably stick with me a little bit longer than the lyrics themselves will. Part of that was, some of the rhyming, and I think it was the first verse or two. It lacked strong rhymes, which made them just a little less sticky. Of course, I'm looking at the lyrics right now, so it doesn't necessarily matter. The message of the lyrics I really liked, being anti-consumeristic. It's about standing up for the helpless. I think it's a very positive message. At least that's what I got out of it. And of course, as always, we should probably have a fourth grade English teacher in here to help us understand words and what they mean. So, as far as scores go for the composition, I think it's important to look at each element separately. I gave it 0.7 out of 1 for each the melody and the lyrics, the rhythm at a 0.6 out of 1, and the harmony a zero point 0.4. I think harmony is probably where we'll differ the
Oh
most,
man,
just because that
yeah.
was my lowest score. And part of that, again, it comes back to the same conversation we just had about Narrow Road, which is complexity. This sounded like probably three, I didn't count, but probably three or four chords, and they're power chords.
Mhm.
So not terribly harmonically complex in that way. The performance, we might also differ there. I give it 2/3 credit, 0.4 out of 0.6 for each the accuracy and the feel. And to justify, I'll just say fast tempos do not make for complex performances, but those tempo changes and the vocal harmonizing that was featured in this track. I'm not sure if it was the band jumping in with sort of a call and response feature, or if it was on the studio version, if it was just the lead vocalist harmonizing with himself on a different take. But regardless, that does give it a boost. So I did really like that. As far as production, solid mix, not much to say about it. The arrangement, pretty standard, verse chorus, bridge chorus, chorus structure, same thing that you hear in most songs, and I would imagine most in the punk genre. But that said, I'm again not necessarily the audience for songs in the punk genre. There was a time when maybe three chords and the truth was enough for me. That's not so much true for me in my old age.
Back in the good old days when we had to ride those dinosaurs to school. Remember that?
Yep, and it was uphill both ways. And those dinosaurs, man, mine
Mine
was
was
fuzzy.
bitey.
What's that?
Mine was bitey.
That's even worse. Uh, I do, like I said, I love the message. It's got a very hopeful tone. I think is the best way to put it. I appreciate the way it's delivered. If you put it into a slower, moodier, maybe more complex arrangement, maybe it would stick with me a lot more. But ultimately, for the appeal, it's still above average for me. I didn't think there was much by way of innovation. Quarter credit for that, but 1.1 out of 1.6 for the emotion that I felt out of it, and 1 out of 1.6 for the repeat listenability. But that's my take on it. Kev, I think you liked it a little bit more, and I think you'll be able to show me the error of my ways. Maybe I need to be a punk again, like I was as a kid.
Hopefully. All right, we'll see. Um, as far as composition goes, looking back, I rated it pretty highly across the board, like very highly, maybe too highly. I don't know. Maybe I was being over generous. But I thought, again, collectively as a sound, they have a really great sound. It's very unique. Rise Against, they have a really good sound. The melody, is very catchy. Again, you said that as well. I give it a point 0.9 out of 1. Point 0.9 again for rhythm. I thought that the rhythm was actually pretty good. That's maybe where we differ most. The lyrics I thought were strong. I gave them a point 0.8. I didn't think they were. I think maybe there was some mixed imagery in there that I couldn't get over, but it was very well spoken. I think, and it just kind of flowed, so I liked it. There's some useful imagery in there. They talked about broken windows. I think that may or may not be a reference to broken windows policing, which is a controversial issue, but I think it was very fitting for the mood of the song or for the message of the song itself. I really like that the song is broken into very starkly contrasted viewpoints from the viewpoint of two different narrators. But again, the message is somewhat confusing for me, and either it's because I'm too old, just like you, Cary, and maybe unable to decipher the message, or there's just some ambiguity there, or maybe some mixed messaging involved. But overall, I thought it sounds good, so it's easy to give it a pass on some of those flaws that it has. That I think it has. As far as performance goes, full marks. Again, this is a professionally recorded song. I think that the strongest points I saw, and this is where we differ on the harmony, I think, is that I could hear the backup vocals, and I thought they were very on point. They might have been kind of drowned out in the mix, so that might be an issue. And that may be why you didn't hear it, or maybe I just was listening for it very intently. But I could hear it, but I could hear, we disagreed. You maybe couldn't tell if it was just the lead vocalist maybe harmonizing with himself. I could definitely hear two distinct backup vocals singing two different tones with respect to the original tone of the lead vocals. So it creates this chordal sound to me, and I thought it was pretty brilliant. And just it's delivered with such energy. I really like that. I dug the energy of the piece. Production again, across the board, I rated it high. Maybe I should have given it fives instead of sixes, but professionally recorded and produced. My appeal for this song, I give it pretty high marks again, 1.4 out of 1.6 for emotion. Innovation, insofar as they have their own distinct sound, I give them an extra point, zero point 0.3 out of zero point 0.4, rather than just middle of the road. And repeat listenability, I do like this song. It's very catchy, kind of has a lot of defiant energy, and this song just really jacks you up. I feel like it's really angsty and unproductive, but it's well delivered. So I gave it a
Angsty
one.
and unproductive. Isn't that how you masturbate?
Do you have a Bible class to go to after this, or I gave it a 1.4 out of 1.6 for repeat listenability.
Okay. I think our differences are, much of the same of what we just discussed on Narrow Road regarding, call it musicianship. I will say these guys are almost certainly playing their own instruments, which is
Something to be said.
which is something to their credit.
Mhm.
Uh, that's nice. I can appreciate it. Uh, Again, there's a I'll call it simplicity, and I don't want to make it sound like I think simplicity is bad, uh, or that I can really hear something that's harmonically richer or more complex. But it comes back to that idea of three chords and the truth. The Sex Pistols are widely credited as the first punk band, and their bass player didn't even know how to play, and it's the bass. That's the easiest instrument. so so as a genre, probably not necessarily well known for complex arrangements or really difficult parts to perform. Although I think maybe the Clash in some regards are, if not indicative of the genre, they're probably the exception to prove the rule. But overall, I liked it. Let's talk about those lyrics for a moment, though.
Sure.
So I really like you picked out the broken window policing theory. Out of it says,
I
I
don't
think
know
the lyric is
that.
what's that?
I do not know that for sure, to be honest with you, but it would be very fitting for the message of the song, I think.
It could be I read it as a text. The specific line that I think you're referencing is, uh, "Let's be on our way. Broken windows and ashes are guiding the way." Oh, he rhymed "way" with "way."
Oh, that's a negative point. Mark that down.
Clever. So what I picture, and this is something I actually liked about the lyrics, is that's imagery. That's direct imagery for me.
Yeah, that's good.
Think about all the footage that you've ever seen of war torn, uh, particularly areas of the Middle East, Iraq, probably around the time when this song was released, Syria more recently, places in Africa. Like bombs go off, windows break, there's rubble, debris, ashes all over the place. I can visualize it. I would probably visualize it better if those words were delivered a little more slowly so that my brain can catch up and then connect with my optic nerve or something. But I think I didn't necessarily catch the dual narrators. I heard this as being just one fairly cohesive story from a single narrator. So what led you to that conclusion, Kev?
Honestly, I didn't. I'm not really sure about that either. So, like, you might be right, but I think the stark contrast between the tempo and the intensity of the vocals and the delivery really stood out to me as seemingly two different voices. One person singing about the past, one person singing about the maybe the past, but also looking at it through a different lens and thinking about their own future rather than the first narrator. And that part, it got confusing to me. So I might be completely wrong about that.
Well, I'll go ahead and uh, put out the APB here. If you're a fourth grade language teacher, hit me up and we'll start something. We'll figure out what some of these songs actually mean. But uh, I
Yeah.
don't think we're very far off, and I don't think there's a lot of hidden layers to the lyrics when taken as a text, because they are certainly cohesive enough to evoke that theme of leaving something bad behind and rising up, and making yourself and your situation in life better. So I thought it was very positive. Liked the lyrics, aside from rhyming "way" with "way," I suppose.
Thanks for pointing that out. I'll never not hear that ever again.
So you're welcome,
Hmm.
or I'm sorry. Either way. But I think it's probably about time to close up shop for the evening. Before we do, Kevin, do you have any other parting shots, or do you want to summarize what we've learned today?
Yeah, your mustache looks funny, Cary. No, I'm kidding. No, just thank you for listening to this. This is a lot of fun for us, and I really appreciate the exercise, and I really appreciate everybody's patience.
Yeah, this is absolutely a lot of fun for us. It might, then again, it might be destroying our ability to just sit down and enjoy music because we're being so critical and scrutinizing so deeply uh, all these different elements that make up songs, whether we like them or we're familiar with them or not at all. So I think that's a good point to wrap up. I too would like to thank everyone for tuning in, for listening, and wish you all a good evening. Thanks so much. I've been Cary Nightingale. That's been Kevin Niebrick. Take care.